Coming up with This Week in Computer Hardware, Raspberry Pi 3 Model B, that Broadcom Qualcomm deal, it's dead. Intel's got hardware fixes for Spectre and Meltdown, Android Wear, and dang, Amazon got big. All that more coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 457, recorded March 15th, 2018. New Pi with a side of CPU flaws coming up.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully so you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/twit. And by the Ring Video Doorbell. Stop crime before it happens and help make your neighborhood safer with Ring. Go to ring.com/twitch and get up to $150 off of a Ring of Security kit. And by IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT pros. Visit itpro.tv/twitch and use code TWICH30 to get a free 7-day trial and 30% off a monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription.
Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most engaging, most delightful, and occasionally even most affordable news about hardware, whether it's mobile, desktop, gaming, productivity, workstation, with the occasional foray into servers and the Internet of Things, or the Internet of, I can't say that word in a family show, but it's a great Twitter feed you should follow if you find security issues with the next generation devices invading your home amusing. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by Mr. Ryan Shrout of PCPer.com. Ryan is, we thought last week was a little odd for news. I feel that this week is even weirder in terms of hardware news.
There's a wide variance, that's for sure. If you want to talk legal disputes, if you want to talk security vulnerabilities, you want to talk new doorbells, we've got all of that. All that is possible.
New Internet of Thing doorbells.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest stories last week was we'd had some people asking. We got into the whole what's going on with Broadcom and Qualcomm, or at least I feel that we talked about that. I may be hallucinating at this point, and why Intel was stepping in, and why Intel going after purchasing Broadcom, possibly to protect their ability to sell modems to Apple. And one of the things that came out of this large, bizarre, rolling story about Broadcom's continuing attempts to acquire Qualcomm was something I didn't know, was that Steve Jobs originally went to Intel and asked them to build a processor for the iPhone. And Intel thought the projections for iPhone sales were somewhere in between ludicrous and incredibly ludicrous, and thus began the giant mess that is Intel's lack of relationship to the mobile industry, except, of course, in the area of selling modems to Apple because of Apple's continuing fight back and forth with Qualcomm. It's all moot at this point because President Trump basically kiboshed the deal, citing the potential for national security issues. Or you could say American leadership in telecom. That's another way of looking at it, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on that. But basically put the kibosh on the Broadcom acquisition of Qualcomm, mostly because everybody figured that if Broadcom racked up $100 million in debt to buy Broadcom, if Broadcom racked up $100 million in debt to buy Qualcomm, the end result would be Broadcom cutting to the bone to make profits, and of course to pay off that loan they would be taking out to purchase Qualcomm, which would reduce Qualcomm's ability to compete in the 5G community and help control 5G standards moving forward.
Right.
And this was, of course, the owner of Broadcom is actually a U.S. citizen. The Broadcom's headquarters are in Singapore for, convenience or tax reasons or whatever. They were, getting in trouble with various and sundry government investigations by basically not announcing with enough time that they would be yanking the headquarters back to the United States, where the vast majority of Broadcom's employees are. It's been a crazy ride. It is effectively over. Do we care at this point? Is this going to have any lasting impact other than we keep hearing more and more and louder noises, basically discussing, the possibility of Chinese telecom manufacturers creating security issues in the United States? That seems to be kind of the big overarching trend in these stories.
Yeah, I think that will be a legacy part of this, right? It paints a pretty specific picture of the fears of the U.S. government in terms of Chinese interference in technological innovation, right? If we talked about things in the past where Huawei wasn't allowed to sell, or what, Verizon was kind of pressured by the U.S. government to not sell Huawei devices to consumers, and on and on. This is another, kind of actually a direct implication against Huawei, because the letter from CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, basically stated that if Qualcomm were to recede from these markets in any way because of the acquisition by Broadcom, that the most likely candidate to fill in for this in terms of developing 5G technology, deploying infrastructure, was Huawei. And for whatever reason, love it or hate it, that the federal government has taken a pretty hard stance that they don't want to see that type of organization have that kind of influence. There were some other things in terms of national security. Qualcomm does have direct, high-level clearance contracts with the government, DoD in particular. Those probably could have been something that was, divested off into its own company to keep doing things, and it might have been fine. But I do think the larger part of this was the potential, the assertion, I guess, the assumption even, that Broadcom was going to decrease R&D pretty dramatically, and thus Qualcomm would fall behind, and thus the biggest U.S. player in the space would no longer be the biggest player in the space. It sets an odd precedent, I think, obviously, for executive intervention and business dealings. It's only the fourth or fifth time that CFIUS has even had to, or that a president has made a decision based on a CFIUS recommendation of like this. And also considering that only 4 or 5 months ago, President Trump and Hock Tan, the CEO of Broadcom, were seen, having pictures together as they were announcing a redomiciling of the headquarters of Broadcom from Singapore back to the US. So it's a very complex process. I think for the industry itself, it creates some stability again. There has been basically 4 or 5 months of questions about what's going to happen with Qualcomm, what's going to happen to all the competitors to Qualcomm and all the partners of Qualcomm. A lot of these OEMs and phone vendors were starting to get a little bit worried. They set these roadmaps out for 5G, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. They have these roadmaps, all the carriers across the world, and they're all based on what Qualcomm says they're going to be able to produce over, a certain number of years. Now, they were all anxious because if Qualcomm suddenly slowed down development, all of their capital expenditures that they were developing towards those goals would be at risk as well. Maybe they were overdeveloping, maybe they were overspending, they were going to lose money that way. So it stabilizes things in that way. I think it had an immediate negative effect on Qualcomm stock. It kind of reset back down to where it was before all the rumors started, which I think was expected. But now, from Qualcomm's standpoint, I can tell you from talking with a lot of people inside the company that they can now just go back to doing work, right? They're going to go back and continue their projects and continue their development and, all of that. So a kind of a sigh of relief across many people in the technology industry, and maybe some grumblings of anger and distrust from the investment community, I think is a fair way to put it.
We were going to make money off this deal. Therefore, no matter what your reasons, saving human lives, preventing the spread of zombie infestations should not be considered. I mock, but it's easy to mock the finance industry, and probably unfair. Researchers say they found 13 flaws in AMD Ryzen and EPYC chips. I like Ars Technica's title, quote, "A raft of flaws in AMD chips make bad hacks much worse. AMD says its secure processor is impenetrable. Instead, it can harbor malware." Oh my goodness, what a mess this story is. Some obscure researchers, or I will say a new and heretofore unproven security organization in Israel, builds a website, gives AMD a whopping 24-hour notice, and then publishes the news that there are all of the vaguely detailed information on how there are these massive flaws in AMD's cores that can, amongst other things, allow nefarious code to operate essentially untouchable inside of the processor.
Right. I think from a security standpoint, there's a couple of things to note. One, I would consider this a secondary threat because it does require you to have a pre-compromised system. None of these, unlike the Spectre meltdown stuff that were basically allowing an application running in standard user space to access memory locations in kernel OS space, this requires you to have root elevated permissions before any of these attacks can take place. So I do kind of put it in a different tier because of that. But that being said, if these end up being validated and true, and AMD comes out and says yes, these are accurate, there's still a potentially big problem there because you are overriding a part of the processor that is not supposed to be overwritten, that is supposed to be the secure enclave for password protection, secure boot, trusted platform module. All that stuff could get potentially. Or could potentially be vulnerable. Worst case scenario, you see a shipment of these processors be intercepted during shipment. A bad actor takes these parts, puts them in motherboards, runs these things on them, compromises the secure boot processor, and then continues them on to the shipping thing. Right? That's like absolute worst case type of thing. But you could still do it remotely if, again, you had root access to the processors. I think 3 of the 4 categories centered around that secure processor and either updating it through Windows or updating it through the BIOS and kind of indicating that you could leave persistent malware on that secure processor that's built on a Cortex A5, 32-bit Cortex A5, sitting on the chip on the die directly. The other one was about the Ryzen chipset, so the X370 and B350 chipset. That is built by ASMedia, and apparently that ASMedia controller that is at the heart of this has a lot of potential vulnerabilities that have been well known for a while, which is, I will admit, more problematic if they have been well known vulnerabilities and AMD didn't address that before partnering with ASMedia to develop this product. So, and then there's a whole other side which we don't have to get into unless you really want to, about the fact that they only gave AMD less than 24 hours notice for the security thing, which is very, very kind of against protocol with these types of things. Usually it's 30 to 90 days of notice. They were pre-briefing media. They were pre-briefing some other security researchers, and then apparently they also pre-briefed some stock research company that is known to do a lot of like stock shorts and stuff, basically gaming the financial system, right? And they wrote a paper that came out the exact same time that said AMD stocks should be worth $0. They should be forced to file for bankruptcy. They're worth nothing, blah, blah, blah. And so regardless of the validity of the security stuff, the fact that they let this come out with this paper from this Viceroy research, which is an absurd look at the situation of how it exists, basically clouds the whole thing. So even if these are legitimate security concerns, the shenanigans of the financial side make it look like it's all one big scheme, right?
You can also argue, not just the shenanigans of the financial side, but the timing where they gave 24 hours. Intel had months. It's generally considered to be, gauche, if you will, to give a company 24 hours notice. It hasn't been a huge response. Last time I checked, there hadn't been a huge response yet from AMD.
No, as of this afternoon, they are still looking into it. They said they're hoping to have a statement out by today, but I can't guarantee that. I've looked at a lot of security flaw announcements in the last few years, especially when I was doing ThreatWire on a weekly basis or every other week. And it is incredibly unusual to give a corporation the size of AMD that short of a notice, and to pre-brief the press on something this serious, and like a financial company. I will be curious.
it'll be, I'm torn because I want these to be not true and then this to have been an incredible slimy hoax to short of stocks. And then there's part of me that also wants them to be true so that when, it's just, it doesn't smell good, it does not smell good to get, it just, I am shocked. I am delighted, however, to change subjects and directions rather dramatically. Pi Day was this week. Raspberry Pi, the Raspberry crew, of course, revealed a new Raspberry Pi model, or not always, but we like to see a new Raspberry Pi model of Pi Day. They came out with the Raspberry Pi 3 Model B+, which includes an updated Broadcom chip running 1.4 gigahertz, and is now finally brought gigabit Ethernet. Now, the gigabit Ethernet is running over USB 2.0 still, so it's still sharing the USB 2.0 path. But the upside of this is that you can now get something like 3 times the performance over Ethernet. For me, I was looking at like 55 megabits max coming out of a Raspberry Pi 3 and up to 150 megabits in some of the network testing I was doing on a Raspberry Pi 3 Model B+. 11AC wireless is now in there along with B and G and N, 2 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. It'll support power over Ethernet. You can see the video right now with a aftermarket or a secondary a Pi hat you can buy from them. And it's about, I want to call it about 16% faster. I just did some very simple, threaded benchmarking on it. And we're looking at about 16% faster than the Raspberry Pi Model 3. Again, the networking is considerably faster. It's much more sensitive to power than some of the previous models. So the standard Raspberry Pi power unit is now a 2.5 amp, 5 volt power supply. One of the older iPad power supplies I've been using Raspberry Pis for a very long time, an Apple unit, because the power from those is pretty clean, would actually die. It would draw too much power and it would black out. So switching to a more powerful 2.5 amp power supply solved that. It's a nice update. There's a little heat sink for the first time on the processor. There's a really nice the antenna seemed to work really well. The wireless performance was excellent. Stability was great. And I can't actually wait to start playing around with some of my favorite dedicated distros like Volumio to see what the performance feels like with remote accessing and stuff. I'll also be curious to run Plex on that. It's a nice piece of hardware, kids.
Looks cool.
Yeah, I'm actually, the thing I wanted to do, but didn't get a chance to do, was to actually look at real-time power information. Because I have a USB power meter, but I did not have the USB to micro USB adapter I needed to take a look at that. But I'll try to get some information on that. But it was a good Pi Day. It's a good update. Cool. I get excited about these things because I love single board computers. You know what else I love? When things in my life get easier. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware, speaking of things getting easier, brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. The mortgage experience not keeping up with the times. If you've applied for a mortgage recently, then you know the definition of pain and personal suffering. The whole thing was dated. They needed to be more client-focused. They needed technology. They needed a technological revolution. They needed a disruption, right? That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. Rocket Mortgage gives you the confidence you need when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Because if you're looking at a 30-year contract, you want to feel good about it, right? Rocket Mortgage is simple. You get to fully understand all the details, be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. It's convenient, right? Their trusted partners allow you to share your financial information with Rocket Mortgage at the touch of a button. I like this. It's powerful. It doesn't matter if you're buying your first home, your 10th home, Rocket Mortgage can perform thousands of calculations in seconds. So the math is practically real time and you know what you're getting into. Change the thing here, you're good. It's going to tell you what's going on. I like this. Based on your income, your assets, your credit, Rocket Mortgage can analyze all of the home loan options for which you qualify and find the one that's just right for you. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/twit. That's rocketmortgage.com/twit. Equal housing lender license in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh, my goodness. So while we're talking about flaws in processors, one of the big things that people have been arguing about is whether or not Intel could patch Spectre and Meltdown as the new processors are announced and released. And Intel says they're going to have 2018 processors with hardware mitigation, not patches, but actual updates to the hardware that make Spectre and Meltdown moot. I would talk more, but you wrote the article, so.
Well, so it's interesting, right? So they announced two things. One that I think is actually interesting is they announced that they now have supplied their partners with microcode updates and patches and all that type of microcode updates, essentially for 100% of all products shipped within the last 5 years.
Good.
So that's a pretty good turnaround time, I think, for validation, especially if you consider the fact that they had the patch in between.
I was going to say this is their second round of patches, so they've lowered, they've lowered the return time on the patches.
Correct. So that's good, and they've also said that they have plans to go back further than that, right? But it's on a slower schedule, right? Like they said, they plan on going back to first generation core processors. So the question will be, once they get those microcode updates, how do they get them out to the people, to the users that are still running those systems? Are they going to have to depend on BIOS updates, or are they going to work with Microsoft to distribute the microcode updates through OS patches? And then if they do that, are they going to support anything other than Windows 10? Probably unlikely. So keep that in mind as we go forward. And then the other interesting thing that they announced today was that, we assumed there was going to be hardware changes because of Spectre and Meltdown, but I honestly didn't think we would see anything that they would claim to be addressing it this year. But they've now said that both Intel scalable, next generation Xeon scalable server enterprise parts called Cascade Lake that will ship this year will have hardware-based mitigation in them, as will, I think their only quote they used was upcoming 8th generation Intel Core processors shipping in 2018. So for both consumer desktop and enterprise data center customers, they're going to have new processors that come out that have additional hardware security built into it. Now, the only detail they've gone into at this point is that they've said, where's that part of my write-up here? Where it says both will include what Intel is calling, quote, virtual fences between user and operating system privilege levels, and will create a significant additional obstacle for potential vulnerabilities. I kind of believe in what we've talked about here in our office is that this is probably integrating something similar to what AMD has done in their architecture, which is why AMD has claimed to be, incredibly unlikely to be affected by variant 2 and 3 of these security issues, because their caching systems keep track of what access level they're supposed to have, and Intel's just kind of didn't as a performance tweak, which wasn't a problem before because we don't have to go back into it, but essentially it wasn't supposed to be accessible anyway. These vulnerabilities claimed that you could do it, or prove that you could do it. So it seems likely what Intel is doing is kind of adding this extra tagging and data to the architecture in order to better be able to flush caches when necessary and not flush caches if it's not necessary to do so, which should improve performance. Should improve performance holistically, and then it should improve it over what like the software microcode mitigations would do. What we don't know is to what degree. Is this going to improve things? The performance degradation, is it going to make it 1 to 2 to 3% better, or 10 or 50% better? We don't really know yet. They're not really talking about it, but I am fairly surprised / impressed that they were able to get this into products that they say are going to be shipping this year and across the the enterprise and the desktop consumer space.
Well, I feel like we're both on record on this show having said, we did not expect any resolution in the upcoming next generation of chips. So
yeah. I agree, and it's possible. And they also kind of say, when I was asking some questions about it, they talk about that they have also kind of made the foundation here a little bit better, so it's easier to update if other potential problems occur in the future. And I don't know what that means. Again, they don't go into a whole lot of detail, and they don't want to yet. It's still a very sensitive topic inside the company, but that's a good sign as well, right? They CEO Brian Krzanich has come out and said, like, this is not a one-time deal for us. This is a long-term focus now that all these things are taken much more seriously than they were before, or with more granularity than they were before. So that's good news. Will that, for the people that were filing class action lawsuits about lost performance on their platform due to this stuff, this isn't going to make them feel any better if Intel says, oh, good news, just buy our next generation part and the performance degradation is minimized. So I'm still curious to see kind of what happens on that side in terms of, consumer pushback, those class action lawsuits, and what the performance penalty of these mitigations actually turns out to be in the upcoming chips versus the current chips with the patches on them. So I'm sure they're figuring all that out now, and we'll know maybe by the end of the year.
We wait with bated breath. We don't talk a whole lot about Amazon's performance in terms of sort of its place in the universe. Right now, I think in terms of market value, it's like market capitalization, it's like third in the world. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But a friend of mine was talking to me earlier this week how Toys R Us is closing, which he's very upset about. Chances are your local PC chain is already gone. And Amazon keeps getting bigger. Crazy number came out this morning in the Wall Street Journal and several other places. 40% of all spending by U.S. consumers online, more than 40 cents of every dollar spent by people like you and me and Ryan and Alan and everybody out there listening, goes to Amazon or goes through Amazon to one of their partners. 54% of U.S. households with internet use Amazon Prime. And the other thing they tossed out, because it's a big number, is Amazon Alexa has 30,000 plus skills. But, that's like saying Sydney got the honor medal in her kindergarten graduation. Go Alexa Cindy. And sorry to all the Amazon Alexa users out there. I shouldn't have said that. But, it's amazing to realize, because we've talked to, occasionally we've talked in the last couple of years that we've gone from Amazon being the one-stop location when we were looking at PC parts to find the best deals to a possible location for good deals. And that, I've been delightfully surprised to find out, we found Shannon a great deal on a GTX 1080 a few weeks ago at Best Buy. I frequently see motherboard prices that are better at Newegg. There's also the issue here in California where we have to pay California sales tax for Amazon. But it's been interesting to watch as Amazon has become a larger and larger and larger and larger part of retail or retail sales or consumer sales in the United States. That it's maybe much bigger than you thought, or maybe 40% is much smaller than you thought. But if you're wondering why so many retail stores are in so much trouble, it's because Amazon apparently is doing a really good job at getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And just want to remind everybody, Amazon's not the only place to shop online. Look around, because oftentimes, like for example, Raspberry Pis, can't buy one on Amazon, or the Model 3B Plus, you can't buy one on Amazon right now, but you can find them at several other places online if you search diligently. So just remember that, because it's going to be like, Taco Bell having won the restaurant wars in a certain, Sylvester Stallone movie from several years ago. And all restaurants are Taco Bell. If we're not careful, all shopping experiences will be Amazon. The GIF or GIF of ultrawide monitors. I'm giggling about this because I completely understand where the author of this article is coming from. Jim, is it Tanis?
Yep.
Or okay, I wasn't sure if it was Tanis or Tanaus, but Jim Tanis. He has a great essay, basically talking about 3840 by 1600 ultrawide monitors, how 160 lines can make all the difference. And I'm giggling about this because I have a really good buddy of mine who gets absolutely irate when he can't get a 16 by 10 monitor, or he can't get the monitor he wants in a 16 by 10 configuration. Where it's like not having that extra 120 pixels at the bottom of the screen, that extra 120 lines just ruins everything for him. So I was kind of picturing my friend's face while reading Jim's article up on PCPer.com. But as somebody who's like, I've got a U3415W, actually there's like 5 or 6 of them we own between our homes and in the office over here. And it's interesting. What he points out is that, Dell, Acer, LG are starting to look at 38-inch ultrawide monitors that run a 3840 by 1600 resolution, which is not only more vertical lines of resolution, but more horizontal lines of resolution. I'll be curious. I haven't been eyes on one of these yet. I'll be curious because I found some of the 38s running at 3440 by 1400 to be, the pixels were just a little larger than I felt comfortable with, which is, ridiculous. But I wear reading glasses now, so everything got big again. But he's pretty excited. And if you've been thinking about shopping for an ultra-wide monitor, I think it's a good time to head over to PC-Per and take a look at what's going on. I have seen the Dell U3818DW, which is a really nice monitor and should be for $1,000.
Yeah. It was interesting because when Jim came to me with this article idea, I didn't really understand it. Reading it, it lays it out pretty well. I also recently started using an ultrawide at my house. I started taking my laptop and using a dock and all that type of stuff. And you definitely need more management of windows when you're doing that type of system, right? I'm much more used to on my laptop or on my multi-monitor at the office. It's kind of like I just kind of full screen things, and most of the time it leaves it where it is, or at least on the desktop when the monitors are stationary, like you're not unplugging them. Things go back to where they're at. If you're unplugging display from your laptop, things never reset correctly. So some third-party software was necessary to kind of like make the windows go back to the spots I wanted them to, which was surprisingly difficult to find, and maybe more surprising that Windows doesn't have any capability to handle that itself. So
it's been interesting because having used these monitors for a while, it's the ultrawides. The first thing, I have a friend of mine who's a programmer and a pretty serious, feral, hackery, I'm going to spend 18 hours a day at a keyboard kind of guy. And he saw the U3415 when I first got it in for review, and he was like, oh, and made really creepy noises. And was like, may I touch your keyboard? And he immediately rearranges, so there was a column of web, a column with a text editor, and a column of I can't remember the tool he put up there. But it was really interesting. For him, it was like dividing it into thirds. That was the perfect situation because everything that Windows does in terms of automatic, like Windows arrow key window arrangement is, designed around the idea that you're going to want to quarter. You're going to either do half vertically, half horizontal, half to the left, half to the right, or, quarter the monitor. And, that's why there are sort of secondary tools you can install, but they don't work as well, I think, as the ones built in. It's not as convenient in terms of the keyboard commands as the ones that are built into Windows. But one, I'd like Windows to adopt that. And two, you really have to kind of manage your windows. And I also run everything usually at 125% on top of the magnification that's running inside of it. Just to make, or at least my browser windows are usually at 125%. Everything else I leave pretty normal. But experimenting with how you lay out your windows will pay incredible dividends because I'm pretty comfortable switching between my ultrawide desktop monitor and my laptop, but there is no doubt that I can do things faster and easier with the big giant mess of pixels on my desktop. So we'll see. Before we mention our next story, I want to remind everybody that we do have a sponsor that makes doorbells, the Ring doorbell. But I bring this up because Nest is not dead yet, although it is being pulled back into Google to be organized inside of sort of the Google Home platform, which is going to be interesting to watch evolve over the next couple of years. But Nest now has a doorbell. Working with Nest Hello, Google Home Mini can announce someone's at the door. Think about that, kids. People walk up to your door, Nest Hello. And it sounds really familiar, right? Because it lets you know who's there, so you never miss a thing. Replaces your existing wired doorbell. Delivers HD video and bright, crisp images. It's designed to show you everything at your doorstep. People head to toe or packages on the ground. With 24/7 streaming, you can check in anytime. Record up to 30 days of continuous video with Nest Aware. I love the fact that it's apparently HDR, which is, if you've ever seen somebody with bright sunlight behind them standing and staring at a video doorbell, you might understand why that might be delightful. Night vision built in. It's $249, which seems to fit with the Nest pricing style, which is to say to be a premium. I'll be, let me make it clear. Nest is not a sponsor. We have a sponsor who makes video doorbells. I kind of gave up on Nest products before the smoke alarm simply because I didn't want to trust the smoke alarms when, if the thermometer can't tell that there are 3 people in the room with it and shuts down the heat in my house because nobody's home. I wasn't sure I really wanted to trust the smoke alarms to detect something considerably more ephemeral and difficult to detect than, say, my wife and children. You can also point out that Nest has the advantages of having a pretty good camera company, home monitoring camera company that they absorbed a few years ago. I'm kind of really curious to see what happens, as they pull sort of the Nest group back into Google and integrate that with Google Home. I hope it becomes as easy to use as some of the other stuff that's out there. But it's also interesting to watch because, a friend of mine bought the Alexa camera and was less than impressed with the results from there. So it's, I think it's yet another Internet of Things opportunity to draw you into one system and lock you down forever. Not that I want to make it sound dramatic, but as somebody who keeps staying on iPhone for amongst other reasons, I have several $100s in software tied up in the operating system. I'm a little, that, and it's just, it's an option. It's out there. Haven't seen any reviews yet. I'm going to assume the camera is fabulous based on some of the other cameras I've seen out of the Nest group. But keep an eye out there. We'll see if we can get one in for review. Speaking of cameras, ladies and gentlemen, this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. Yes, Ring is a sponsor. We mentioned that. Ring's mission is to make neighborhoods safer, and the Ring Video Doorbell lets you see and speak to intruders on your smartphone from anywhere, even share video clips with neighbors using the Ring app. Ryan actually has Ring at home. He's got a Ring at work. Ring's floodlight and spotlight cam lets you build a ring of security around your entire property, just like Ring's video doorbell. Floodlight cam is a motion-activated camera and floodlight that connects to your phone with high-visibility floodlights, HD video, and two-way audio. It lets you know the moment anyone steps on your property. See and speak to visitors, even set off an alarm right from your phone. And when things go bump in the night, you'll immediately know what it is. Ring floodlight cams offer the ultimate in home security. Thieves just can't hide with Ring, or at least you can figure out if it's your neighbor's dog that's been doing naughty things in your flower bed. Monitor every corner of your property with a Ring of Security kit, which includes a Ring Video Doorbell and your choice of either 1, 2, or 3 floodlight cams. And connect your Ring of Video Doorbell with your favorite smart locks and hubs for added convenience, monitoring, and security. Stop crime before it happens and help make your neighborhood safer with Ring. Save up to $150 on a Ring of Security kit at ring.com/Twitch. That's ring.com/Twitch. $150 off when you go to ring.com/TWiCH. That is a fantastic sale, people. We want to thank Ring for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Oh my goodness. Android Wear rebranded as Wear OS because, it's not just for Android. Works for iOS too. Now, if Qualcomm would, just develop some new chips for watches, I think Android Wear would be, Wear OS would be in significantly better shape. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Ars Technica had a nice article. It's literally been 2 years since Qualcomm's last smartwatch chip. I do love that title. Android Wear is getting killed, and it's Qualcomm's fault. We'll see. We also, should point out that the Verge's article is very clear that, Wear OS doesn't give iPhone users all the same features as Android users, and they probably can't because of the way the operating systems are different. But, right. It's also crazy to realize just exactly how good a year or two Apple's had. Apple's been growing like 50% year over year in terms of wearables or smartwatch sales. And between, I want to say Apple's got like 20% of the market. Between Apple and Fitbit, it's like 30% of the wearables market, just wrapped up in between them. So,
I don't know. There's clearly some, improvements that could be made if the SoC, the chip that was powering these devices, would get better. But you got to wonder, is there a lack of push from Google internally to get their partners such as Qualcomm to build these products, because there hasn't been a whole lot of change and shifting and innovation in that space. But to be fair, I feel the same way about the Apple Watch, right? I don't feel like its latest generation is very different, right? I have the one that has LTE in it, and you know how many times I've used that? Exactly one time, because as it turns out, I don't go surfing in the middle of a lake very often.
Maybe you should.
So maybe I should, but I normally have my phone with me when I have my watch on. It's just kind of how I live, I guess. So, you know, I remember that story from a while back. I don't think it's Qualcomm's fault. I'm sure Qualcomm is working on plenty of lower power, smaller form factor chips for a bunch of other applications that could be used for a wearables form factor. It's just a matter of, are they getting the request from their partners to make such a thing, whether that be Google or Huawei or whoever who's building Samsung, whoever's building these chips or building the watches, I guess. So, you know, maybe the rebrand will help, but a rebrand doesn't do anything unless you're going to put additional capabilities and functionality behind it. And that takes a marriage of hardware and software, which is what makes Apple the leader in that space, because they can just decide to do that. Whereas it takes two people to decide to do that on the watch side. And if you've ever been in a marriage where you have to decide where you're going to go to eat that night, when it takes two people to come to a decision, it always takes longer.
Oh boy. Yeah, there's a great line from Ars Technica. This rebranding is sadly the best news about Android Wear has gotten in about a year. Before this announcement, it would have been easy to suspect that Android Wear was dead, as it has major problems all throughout the ecosystem and it hasn't seen much support from Google. So,
yeah.
Android Wear 2.0 released about 13 months ago, and we haven't heard a peep about a new version. 2.5 years between version 1.0 and 2.0. Huh.
Yep. I just don't see the drive from either party here. And as a person who's worn a smartwatch consistently for the last 2 or 3 years, it's basically a notification machine for me.
Right.
And 70% of the time when I feel a vibration on my wrist, I reach down and touch my phone to see what it is. Because if it's something I want to interact with, I don't want to talk to my watch. So I'm going to interact with it on my phone. So I just have gone down that route. So I don't know. Maybe I'm the oddball out in that, because clearly Apple's selling a lot of devices, but selling them and actually seeing utilization from them are still very different things.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I'm apparently, yeah, maybe we should be in more, there's a name for it. It's a particular type of exercise that I can't remember the name of. But I'm envisioning this room full of people with medicine balls and strange obstacle courses.
I'd say for me, it would be exercise in general, but yeah, I gotcha.
I heard you exercised just last week. Round of golf. Carried your own bag.
Not yet. Almost getting there.
CalDigit Thunderbolt Station 3 Plus dock is, what's the word on this, man?
So I don't know if your experience has been like mine, but in general, Thunderbolt docks kind of suck.
So the Dell dock for the XPS 13 is great if you're running Windows. It is missing a lot of incredible features if you're running Linux, because Linux doesn't support them. Third-party docks are problematic, in my experience, on both Windows and every other operating system on the planet.
Yeah.
I have no idea if there are any good OS X docks. Because I'm not running an OS X laptop currently. But I feel comfortable in saying that Thunderbolt docks, when they work, are awesome, because you have one connection and you've got your video cable and your power and your ponies, and it's awesome. And a lot of times we run into like $250 pieces of hardware that don't really do anything. Maybe they power, or maybe they do video, or maybe they occasionally do both until something is upgraded and then it stops working again. So this sounds bitter and angsty. It's because this whole process has been really pathetic.
It has been. So this is probably the best experience we've had with those. I also have that Dell dock, and it works okay. But for example, we've had compatibility issues using it with non-Dell machines. That Dell dock did not support.
At least the Dell stuff works.
True. So for example, I was talking about I'm using a 3440 by 1440 monitor at home with this laptop, this ThinkPad laptop, and I wanted to do the dock thing. I didn't want to put another computer at home because I'm not at home as much as I used to be. I'm not working there. So the idea of having a Thunderbolt dock that had my display and storage and networking and keyboard and mouse hooked up to it sounded great. The Dell dock connected to this, I didn't test it on other hardware, wouldn't pass through the 75 hertz refresh on that monitor. It would do 3440 by 1440 at 60 hertz, but not 75 hertz. So like weird kind of things like that. This CalDigit device kind of solved all of those problems. It had no problems passing through the higher refresh rate display. All of the connectivity worked, the USB, the audio, the optical audio output that it has on there, the gigabit Ethernet. Storage performance was excellent out of it. It has it's kind of built into it's relatively compact compared to some of the other ones, and it builds in its own heatsink to the chassis of the device, itself. It has, I think, 165 watt power brick, so you have no problems, pumping the full power out into your laptop for charging. We tested it with a PCIe SSD external drive. That TechQ up there, and we got 2.2 gigs read and 1.3 gigs write. So again, full speed on that particular device, all kind of running simultaneously. Actually, if you look at that screenshot of performance, you'll see that we're running a USB 3.1 drive, a Thunderbolt drive, a file copy from the NAS over the network, and all that is going full speed. We're showing 40% of our CPU utilization, but all of these transfers are happening at the same time, and we had really good experiences with it. And the truth of the matter is, in theory, a good Thunderbolt dock should just be seamless, right? You have to worry about what software is attached to it, because everything is essentially a pass-through to it. And this one just kind of did that. It just worked. What I would like to have seen, probably another full-size DisplayPort output on it would have been nice. But they do have, a Thunderbolt and DisplayPort, and so you can do Thunderbolt pass-through, and it has USB 3.1 Gen 2, and I think it has 6 USB 5 gigabits, with USB 3.0 ports on it. Plus, I said that optical audio, which is kind of a unique feature to have on a Thunderbolt dock. But it's $250. It's not cheap, but that's actually on the lower end of most Thunderbolt docks today, and it just worked. And Jim, who did the story we talked about earlier, he uses a lot of Macs, and he says in his experience, the CalDigit docks that he's been using, he's used back to Thunderbolt 1 days, 2, and now up to 3, have all worked very well on Mac hardware as well. I didn't confirm that on this one, but he said in his experience, they've all been very good in that direction too. So if you're on the lookout for something, and we tested this on Dell, on Lenovo, and on Asus machines, and it functioned correctly on all of them. So take that for what you will.
I will.
Should. There you go.
I will. I'm okay. Consider it taken. It's nice to see there's one out there that actually works with a lot of things, which would seem to be the whole point of a standard port with a standard device doing standard
That was
things.
the goal, I believe. Yes.
I'm just saying. Oh, goodness. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Build or expand your IT career with IT Pro TV. Over 3,300 hours of binge-worthy on-demand training with more than 125 hours added weekly. They are serious about keeping the video flowing to you. Stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on-demand worldwide. Chromecast, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, PC. Use their iOS or Android apps. They don't care what you use. They make the video available. And there's no need to go off-site for training. Train wherever you are with whatever you got. Seasoned IT pros, they understand the importance of continued education for career development. IT Pro TV does IT live every day, so you know you're getting the most current IT training. Courses include Certified Ethical Hacker, Kali Linux, AWS, ITIL, and ICS Squared Security. So much going on there. If you're interested in IT Pro TV's team solution, contact them. They got group pricing for you. You can track your team's results. You can prove the return on investment of your training spend. Know what's going on. Jimmy, you got to finish watching that. It's time, Jimmy. You'll gain full control over your team's training schedule so you can create custom groups and training assignments, see individual and group analytics, logins, viewing time, video downloads, and course completion tracking. Doesn't matter if you're eager to start your new career in IT or if you're a seasoned pro or you're looking for an engaging way to keep your team up to date, IT Pro TV offers effective and entertaining IT training. Visit itpro.tv/Twitch to learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution and to request a free team trial. Or sign up for an individual monthly membership with a free 7-day trial at itpro.tv/Twitch. Use the code TWICH30 to receive 30% off your subscription for the lifetime of your active subscription. Premium subscriptions, which include unlimited transcender practice exams and virtual labs, are normally $857 a year, but you only pay $600 when you go to itpro.tv/Twitch and use that code TWICH30. That's TWICH30. Flexible training, binge-worthy content, ROI proven. Join the more than 90,000 IT Pro TV members today. We want to thank itpro.tv for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. So much to learn. AMD FreeSync 2 for Xbox One S and Xbox One X. It has been so long. What's going on with FreeSync on the Xbox Ones?
So this is interesting in that, so the Xbox One has been using an AMD GPU, an AMD APU essentially in it the entire time. And the question was always like, okay, what features does this support and not support? It has HD. All these have HDMI output. They don't have DisplayPort output, but AMD does support FreeSync over HDMI. So they finally kind of announced this during a live stream this weekend that FreeSync support was coming to the S and the X models, the more recent models. This is actually really cool. This is the first time a non-PC has really integrated, variable refresh for anything gaming related. Apple kind of talked about it for their iPhones, and but we haven't really seen any implementations of it, or at least I haven't seen any implementations of it. The problem is there are no TVs that support FreeSync today. And if you listen onto the stream, they very specifically say connecting it to FreeSync monitors, not TVs. I do believe, so HDMI 2.1, I think, integrates support for a variable refresh spec into HDMI, much like DisplayPort 1.4 did, right, or 1. Whatever version of DisplayPort added adaptive sync. There's no comparable on HDMI for now. That being said, I expect there to be one probably in early 2019. I think you'll maybe see HDMI 2.1 TVs at CES next year. So this is kind of paving the way for that. It's also disappointing because there aren't a lot of large format monitors that I would consider to be, appetizing to the console gaming market, right? Usually when you're talking about console gaming, you're talking about somebody who's playing in front of a TV. I'm sure there are plenty of people that have, a 24-inch or 27-inch monitor in their bedroom or their dorm room or whatever. That's where their PC's hooked up and where they play their console games. And in which case, you actually get to take advantage of this. There's still some limitations. It peaks at 60 hertz, right? So you can't, if you have a 120 hertz HDMI TV, it's not going to go above 60 on the Xbox. And we don't yet know, and I've asked several times since last weekend, does it support LFC, the low frame rate compensation? Or are you stuck within that 40 to 60 hertz limit of these displays? Because in G-Sync, the low frame rate compensation is done on the monitor itself, whereas on FreeSync, it's done at the driver. And Microsoft wrote the driver for FreeSync implementation on this. It's their console, what have you. And I haven't been able to anybody to get me an answer on whether or not LFC is a functioning thing. But it's a fantastic first step, I guess, and it proves that Microsoft is at least paying attention.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because the only reason HDMI 2.1 has variable refresh into it is because AMD's, I think, pushed really hard for it to be included in 2.1. We're not even going to see the first HDMI 2.1 certified cables coming out to like the middle of this year. I'm not sure when the first TVs are going to ship. Did I hear you correctly in that 60 hertz is going to be the maximum on either Xbox?
Yeah, so it only supports up to 60 hertz through the HDMI output as of today, right? So even at 4K, it's 4K 60, right? So,
but that does kind of So it doesn't matter what cable you plug. Basically, current generation Xboxes won't go over 60 hertz.
Right.
Okay. So perhaps we could see a next generation Xbox that'll do 120 hertz and actually be able to take advantage of it. It just seems like,
yeah.
It just seems like it's more sort of marketing and putting a flag in the ground than something that's actually going to be beneficial to users.
Well, I think there are plenty of instances for Xbox gamers where, you know, the game is targeted at 60 frames per second, but it dips down. If you watch Digital Foundry videos, they do very good at analyzation of kind of console game performance. There's plenty of instances where it drops below 60 and you get the stuttery, chunky mess because they do VSync enabled on consoles, right? If you look at something like PUBG, which is targeting 30 frames per second, but dips below that even sometimes, a potential, you know, variable refresh would be potentially beneficial for that as well. So I still think there's a significant gaming benefit to this in the console space. It's not as significant on the PC space, and it's not as flexible in the PC space. But I do imagine that, you know, maybe next year we'll see TVs that have 120, like true 120 hertz refresh rates and variable refresh, and now you have a console that support it. And I would wager the Xbox One X could support that today with a driver update, because it is running Radeon graphics hardware in there. They just have to update the driver to do so, which is very possible.
I sit in a completely different place now. I'll be curious. Logitech announces the G560 speakers and G513 keyboard with light sync. This announcement came out earlier today, and right there you have it, people. There's an explosion on the right. The right speaker is blowing red light out of its LED posterior. The one on the left has got the blue sky action going. Finally, your game, your motherboard, your keyboard, your mouse, and your speakers can all be rocking the same lighting effects. I'm just saying. It's an interesting idea, right? Sebastian mentions Philips Ambilight TVs, and there's been a lot of DIY sort of recreations of the technology where instead of just putting some white LEDs to create a halo of light that makes the transition from a dark room to a bright screen more manageable, they would actually do light that was complementary to the lighting that was on the TV itself, and that would sort of, you know, there'd be a big TV, and then behind that there would be a display of light. This is kind of crazy. I'm actually really looking forward to getting onto these just to see what it feels like. Plus, the battle station creation videos around these are going to be epic. But you know, they've got the G560, which is a big fat honking amplifier and a little tiny subwoofer, DTS:X Ultra 1.0, and then it's basically got built-in RGB lighting.
The cool thing here is that the software lets you set regions on the screen for it to monitor, right? So you can tell it where to look, and it apparently works with like all games and stuff. So I don't even know how it's scraping the color data from it. I don't know if they're kind of working some back magic with DirectX and you know, looking at the frame buffer or something like that. But you know, apparently it's very responsive, and you know, obviously I'm sure that picture we're looking at there is stylized for artistic methods, but you know, I think it's interesting to try out. It's also only useful if you have a wall behind your desk, which, like, at my office I do not have that, but at my actually at my house now I don't have that either. It kind of looks over a balcony. My desk faces out over a loft balcony. So, well,
you could draw the curtains on the balcony, or perhaps the light will be reflective on the glass wall facing the balcony, right? It's a big sliding glass door. I bet it'll reflect nicely off that in a blinding sort of haze.
Just a piercing blue LED. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm blind. And then you got snapped. You know, I mock the LEDs and the lighting because, you know, it was the lights on motherboards that, it was lighting on motherboards that finally broke me. That, and you know, when one of my children figured out how to make the what we affectionately refer to as unicorn vomit spray across a keyboard I was testing, where it was just like a full rainbow, as bright as it could be, that would just pulse across the front of the keyboard. But this actually is kind of compelling, especially if you are into gaming in the darkness and you would like something that is striking and possibly a little easier on the eyes in its own way. Yeah, I think we're both going to try to get these in and take a look at them and see what's going on there. Goodness. Who knows what the next week in hardware will bring? We're pretty sure we're done with Qualcomm purchase news, unless Intel decides to be completely crazy and try to purchase Qualcomm, which would solve their mobile market problem. We got a date in June for the announcements on the next iOS and Macintosh products coming from Apple. I'm very curious to see what they do on the phone side of things. If for no other reason than, the rumors we heard earlier this year that iPhone X sales were not as high as Apple anticipated. Will we see another flagship? Will there be something more on the entry-level side of things? Will it be an iPhone 9 just for the sheer unbridled joy of packing yet another number into the lineup? I'm really curious. I'm really curious to see what they do with the laptops too, because I've had a lot of people, more I think than I've ever heard in years, where they are finally just frustrated and moving off OS 10, not because they want to leave the operating system, but because the hardware options are just frustrating them. That varies. I'll be very curious to see what the lineup looks like, and if Apple feels like they care about the Mac lineup again, because they make a lot of money on iTunes and on iOS devices. So we'll see. Anything you can tease that's coming up over at PC Per?
Oh man. Well, we do have our review of the new Dell XPS 13, the 9370, the 2018 model, to post up. Also, how about a 1600 watt power supply?
Is that for the miners?
It's for whoever needs 1600 watts of compute. You be the judge.
Oh my goodness. I do not. I'm still contemplating the fanless 600 watt power supply unit we talked about recently.
That was good. That was cool.
That was good. Yeah. I have one 850 watt power supply, and I have nothing that will even remotely tax that thing. So if you're thinking about using a 1600 watt power supply, please tweet at Ryan Shroud or at Patrick Norton and let us know what you plan to power with your 1600 watt power supply, and what's going to happen if someone else in your house turns on any other device on that same circuit. Will it blow? I bet the answer is yes. If you somehow manage to tap all 1600 watts. You're listening, by the way, in case you stumbled into this in the dentist office or something, to This Week in Computer Hardware. You can find more of This Week in Computer Hardware, all the older episodes, at twit.tv/Twitch. As I mentioned before, he's at Ryan Shroud. I'm at Patrick Norton. And we are excited that you listen to the show today. And thank you so much. With that, I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shroud.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.